What makes a great story? Is it the plot? The characters? Maybe the setting? Does it need to be short or long? Filled with tension or suspense? The Ames Public Library is filled with great stories. In books, both big and small, in movies, digital media, and the patrons. Your interactions with those around you and the situation. For ages 1 to 100, you will find a story here. But who wants to start at the end of a story? If you do want to start at the end, you know what happens. The library opened. But that's not the whole story. In the fall of 2012, the staff of the Ames Public Library moved the entire collection and the shelving units into a temporary space.
Last night at 9 o'clock, the library closed for business, and as you can see behind me this morning, they are very excited about starting the move process.
This is the very first morning of the first day of the move process. So there's a lot of new volunteers, and I would be one of those who require considerable training as to what we're expected to do to help get the library loaded up onto trucks and moved over to the new location on Lincoln Way.
What does it take to move a library? Years of planning? Yes. Professional movers? Sure. But like any fiscally conservative homeowner, there's a lot of money to be saved by doing it yourself.
That's a thoughtful decision that was made by the library staff with input from others. It will save us money, which is important, but even more so, it will really involve the staff and the community volunteers in the whole process. It can be done efficiently, it can be done economically, and it's going to be exciting and fun.
Staff have said we can do this with public help. And so we went forward with that and are very confident in that. So we were able to then, instead of spending the money on that, we're able to spend it on things that we can use in the library. It's unusual for us to do it on our own, but we're gonna do it.
All right, day one, this is 6:20. We have made it through our first shift successfully, no major hassles, which is awesome. Kind of how the process works is a truck will come up and we get as many hands on deck as we can and everybody helps unload. So when a truck comes over, it's got shelving on it and the bracket pieces on it and end caps on it and all kinds of stuff in the back, and then in the front is all of the book carts full of books. So we get about 10 carts plus a whole run of shelving. A crew starts assembling shelves. They lay them down on the ground and put all of the brackets together, then they stand them up and they get them all tightened so they're in a line. Then they will go through and put the shelves onto all of the brackets, and then a line is ready to go. We get everything off and then we line the carts up in order. Each cart is labeled with a number. So far, it seems to be working extremely well. We're moving right along.
Our goal yesterday was to move about 50 carts, and we thought that was pretty reasonable. It turns out we moved more like 100 yesterday. So we're working at really a tremendous pace, and it's just really gratifying to see all the planning come together at this point.
By all accounts, the move into the temporary space was a success. Originally planned for 3 weeks, it only took 6 days. With the books moved out and set up in the temporary library, the construction of the renewed library began.
We've had kind of a tough start in the spring. If you recall, we had a really wet spring, and that did kind of affect construction progress. Right now, we're about 50% complete, here. It's mid to late December, and all of the mechanical, electrical rough-in and wall framing is underway inside the building. And so that's on first floor. Upstairs, we've already had some drywall be installed. So that's really where we're at. On the exterior, of course, it's winter, but they're still continuing with getting the kind of perimeter of the building envelope installed, and real soon a lot of the metal panels on the outside will be installed.
It's December, it's a year since we've been moved out of the building. We should be moving back in late summer, so it's just rolling right along. We'll be moving back in before you know it.
While construction was progressing at 515 Douglas, the library continued to serve the public at its temporary location. A big part of the renovation project, the temporary space, was a challenge of its own.
It was a struggle finding the temporary space, but we were very pleased with the outcome. It served the needs, it had great parking. Actually, we got some new clientele for the library based on the location.
We do know that a lot of people enjoyed our location over there, but we really were cramped. Staff were sharing tiny spaces, and all of our collections were not displayed, not to mention the fact that we could not do any of the programming that we so sorely missed.
Of course, we didn't know going in. We had planned it very carefully, but we didn't know going in what the ambiance would be, and we were very pleasantly surprised that it felt like a library, functioned like a library, and worked out very well for us and the community. But it wasn't so nice that we weren't really anxious to get out of there and get back home.
In 1984, the library moved from the 1940 existing library into the expansion by way of a book brigade. Staff and community members lined up shoulder to shoulder and passed the books into the new space. As the current library got closer to moving back into 515 Douglas, the idea of having another book brigade was suggested. But now, they weren't moving from one building into the adjacent building. This time, the existing library was a mile away, with a major thoroughfare in between.
Well, we're doing a book brigade to celebrate the closure of this library and the reopening in about a month. These are stickers that everyone will have and postcards explaining what's happening. We have 14 books that are being prepared. There are helium balloons being attached to each one. And we will hopefully form a human chain from here to 515 Douglas and pass those books from here to there, hand to hand.
All right, so because these balloons are going to stay on the book the whole way, we have to make sure that they stay nice and tight. So we don't move the string at all. They placed it very carefully there.
We're standing in line waiting for the first book to arrive.
August 18th, the first day that we're moving our books into our newly refurbished library.
The time had finally arrived. Moving day. After the book brigade celebration, the library closed and the remove began. Moving a library isn't easy, even if you've done it before. Not only do you have to move it, but you have to plan everything. Where will each collection go? How accessible will it be to the patrons? Does it fit the goal of serving the customer?
We're librarians, so the first thing we go to is we think of books. Let's see if there's a book on how to help us move a library. And there happens to be one that's how to move a library.
It took a lot of people who really could wrap their mind around the whole process and figure out if this is our overall goal, what pieces do we need to make sure are in place, and then how do we line them up just right.
The actual move was fabulous. We figured it out. We got all of our staff involved, but then our volunteers came. We figured out the best way to do it in an organized fashion, and it just really came together.
It is really amazing to think about what we've done that's outside of your typical job description of a librarian. The only way that we could have pulled this off was through the efforts of many, many, many people.
One of our employees, Seth, has figured out a system to kind of provide guide points. We call them waypoints, to see how close we are to actually being, having the right amount of space left at the end.
Before we moved out of the library for the first time, I was assigned to help figure out how to get the books from the shelves in this library into the shelves on the temporary library, and then do the same thing on the way back.
Seth waypointed the whole library. Here's where all these different collections are going to land, and here's how it's all going to be spaced out. And that's all in his head, and he had it all figured out. But it took a number of other people who are willing to go along and count all the shelves to help give him the information he needed to be able to do that.
I think that we have an incredible assembly of really wonderful people who are dedicated and committed, and we're able to dig deep, find inner resources that allowed them to be flexible and to accept change after change, and a really chaotic work environment often throughout the last few years.
On September 14th, 2014, the Ames Public Library started the next chapter of their story. The renewed library opened with much fanfare. Several new features are available in the renewed library. The automated materials handling system helps the library, which is now 30% larger, keep operating at the same staffing level they had before the expansion. A floor plan that has the children's area solely on the first floor in the southeast corner of the building, with open space and a single point of egress to help staff keep an eye on the little ones. Meeting rooms available for the public, study rooms available for smaller groups, a media box that contains new movies, popular music, and other featured items. Chairs? Oh, the chairs.
My favorite part of the new library is all the chairs that I get to explore now and find a new favorite one just about every day to read a chapter of my whatever I'm working on that day during my break. We get 20-minute breaks in the morning, and I've been trying out chairs every morning for a couple weeks now.
We have enough bins for all the books to be in the bins. Our board books are now in little miniature bins, which are very cool. We didn't have a space for our tweens, or our first, second, third, fourth, fifth graders, and we have a wonderful L-shaped area that that age group will find a niche in the library that is age appropriate for them.
So much more room for folks to sit down and read, to study at a table, to gather in small groups, or to just have some quiet space to enjoy the atmosphere and being with others.
I love how the original Carnegie building has been restored with historic touches, so that it provides contrast to this new space that we're currently in.
I've got a spot where I would be at different points in my life. If I was 5 in this library, that I would be on the elephants, and if I was 12 and in the library, I would be curled up in one of the chairs over by the teen space. I love the tall wingback red chairs by the genealogy section because they're beautiful.
People are going to be able to come in and watch videos and play games and do what they need to do on their computers, even their own devices, and be able to do it without the internet being really slow.
It's just really fun to see people in this space and using it, and seeing how they've chosen to use it and how that matches with what our intentions were.
Just after 1 week of being open in the new location, the library had over 15,800 visitors and checked out an impressive 28,000 items. Somebody told me once that just a few weeks after the 1984 edition opened, they were at capacity. Today, the library has room to grow.
For the last few years, whenever I added a new material and purchased a new material, I had to take one away. because we were just at max capacity.
You know, in the past, people came and they only came for books. We know libraries are far more than that now. They're here as a social meeting place. They're here to gather. They're here to relax and unwind. They're here to get information. They're here to seek entertainment. There are so many different ways that the library is being used, and we want to have a building that serves all of those very well.
What makes a story great? That's for you to decide. But for me, a story that is engaging, has characters you know and enjoy, and doesn't have to end, now that's a great story.